Hello. So I chose Gardner's multiple intelligences. So we are all familiar with this sort of false dichotomy of left brain versus right brain people. So we think of left brain people as sort of analytical, maybe more geared towards science. They might have jobs as um, science teachers or, business executives, those types of things. Versus right brain people, we stereotype them as sort of eccentric and creative, and we might see them as artists or, kind of literary minded. But really, this is incorrect because everyone has left brain, right brain capacities. But taking it even further, Gardner's theory breaks it down into 9 different types of intelligences. His original theory, published in 1991, actually had 6, but he's since added to his theory. Now, that's not to say that one person has one type of intelligence. We all potentially have these 9 types and are more geared towards certain ones. So, for instance, I would probably categorize myself as an existential, intrapersonal, um, linguistic type of intelligences. But that doesn't mean that I can also engage with musical or naturalist on some level. So, verbal linguistic is going to be your students who are your more traditional. That's kind of what the curriculum emphasizes is this ideal student who's the verbal linguistic learner. So they might do really well with actually reading and writing. They might enjoy activities like word games or poetry or things like that. Um, Whereas your logical mathematical student, we do think of kind of usually people are really good at language arts and history or math and science. And so that's probably because they have a different type of intelligence. It's not to say that one student is intelligent and one is not, they just have different types. And so these students might be interested in more like logical trains of thought. So they might like to do sort of an investigative approach to literary analysis, for instance. And I'm, thinking, of course, primarily in ELA terms, because that's my specialty. Visual spatial learners, so these guys are super aware of their environments. They are probably more imagistic. And so, for an ELA unit, they might really do well with a poetry unit where we're analyzing verbal imagery because it's not just the actual physical surroundings. They have the sort of mind that can visualize. They don't have to actually necessarily be in a virtual environment, although if we had the tech and the resources, that would be amazing. So bodily kinesthetic learners, they like to move and they like that experience. That's how they best cement their learning. And while the picture that I have here is of dancers, that's not necessarily to say that that's only those types of students. You might have an athletic student who is also a bodily kinesthetic learner. So this is where we might see overlap, where you might have a more artistic bodily kinesthetic or a more maybe naturalist bodily kinesthetic. With musical intelligence, they're kind of sensitive to rhythm and sound, and so they might study better with some music in the background, or they might even do really well in a poetry unit where we're analyzing the rhythm that's used, and whether it's pentameter or quadrimeter. Um, so interpersonal, this is important to note that it's interpersonal. These are the kind of chatty, social little butterflies. They thrive on kind of group discussions and being with their friends and socializing. And so this is kind of probably where we might want to activate social constructivist theory and things like that. And they might actually, when it's not possible to do group work it might be good for them to individually work on a presentation that will be presented for the class and sort of activate their learning so that they will be teaching content to their peers and that engages their interpersonal intelligence. And this is as opposed to intrapersonal, which is where they're very self-aware. And this isn't to say that they're just super shy and nervous around their peers. It's that they're confident enough in themselves and in touch with themselves enough to kind of be comfortable enough to do independent study. And so these kids might more enjoy individual work, and we have to be sensitive to that with differentiation so that we're not forcing them to work in groups if they really do best when they're kind of not distracted by that social pressure. And then kind of on the outskirts is the naturalist and existential intelligences. We don't tend to really kind of focus on these. Um, the naturalists are just sort of in tune with nature, and so like they might really enjoy getting to go outside for a day if the weather is nice, or um, field trips are obviously ideal, but they can't always be accommodated. And then, of course, existential learners are your kind of, they're probably going to be the kids who are most likely to say, well, why do we have to learn this? And I would just urge you to not, take offense to that, but really let that work for you and try to engage them and explain, this is really why, because they really want the answer. So obviously, when we talk about any kind of learning theory, we want to think about the teaching application. And, it could be easy to be kind of stumped by this or overwhelmed, but really it's just like a facet of differentiation and trying to cater to different types of learners, which we're already basically doing. It's just kind of keeping another facet in mind. Um, However, specific ways to accommodate in the classroom, especially with product differentiation. So, for a linguistic learner, you might have them do writing or making videos because really that is a form of storytelling. And then logical mathematics, you might ask them to conduct a survey and graph the results. So you might, have them do something kind of fun and creative, like ask people um, what their opinion is on a certain theme in a text or something like that. For bodily kinesthetic, you might ask them to take a scene and highlight a certain like motif or something and then act out a skit based on that. For visual spatial, you might ask them to draw a diagram, like maybe a plot arc or something like that. Or you can ask them to maybe illustrate a comic. For musical learners, you might ask them to do some sort of lyrical work, especially, like I said, for poetry units. For interpersonal, you might ask them to teach the class, which is useful for them because it engages them. It's useful for you because you're kind of getting to hand the ball over. It's useful for the class. They're obviously going to be engaged by their peer. For intrapersonal learners, it would be probably great for them to do some sort of individual writing work. Again, this is probably where we see a lot of overlap between intrapersonal and linguistic learners. So, blogging, journals, essays, but we really want to engage them with more personal topics. And then for naturalistic, obviously, it's not always feasible to do field trips, but take the class outside on a nice day, or maybe have a poetry unit where there's some naturalistic imagery or something like that. There are ways around obstacles. And then from the administration, there does seem to be a little curriculum bias, but we're going to encounter that anyways with CRP and differentiation and UDL. Um, so don't let that stump you. And these are my references. I hope you learned a bunch about Gardner's multiple intelligences. Thank you.